When my son, Daniel, told me that I wouldn't be welcome at his home for Christmas, I smiled, gathered my things, and made a single phone call. By New Year's, I had their mortgage payments cancelled, and that was only the start of my plan. Justice needed to be restored, and their arrogance needed to be humbled. You won't believe what happened next. I was settling deeper into Michael's leather couch, thinking about making my famous turkey this year. The one with sage stuffing your mother always adored. Do you remember how she'd always say it was even better than her grandmother's? The smell of expensive vanilla candles drifted in the air, mingling with memories. Michael shifted beside me, his wedding ring catching the light from their grand Christmas tree. Something in his posture changed, like he was bracing himself for something. "Dad," Michael said softly, "you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, almost certain I hadn't heard correctly. "What do you mean? Why wouldn't I be welcome?" I asked, trying to understand. Michael couldn't meet my gaze. His eyes fixed on the marble coffee table, the one I had helped him pick out when Isabella decided their old furniture was too outdated. "Isabella's parents are coming, and they'd prefer if you weren't here." My hands went cold. "They'd prefer?" I repeated. His voice became smaller with each word. "It's just easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is about traditions." His voice trailed off, as if apologizing for something he wasn't truly sorry for. I looked around the living room, taking in the silk curtains I had paid for when Isabella complained about privacy, the hardwood floors that had come from a second mortgage, and the crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. Every inch of that house bore the marks of my sacrifice. "Their own way," I murmured, anger building inside me. "And what way is that, Michael?" He flinched. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked at him, and then toward the kitchen, where Isabella's new mixer sat, a $2,000 luxury I had funded. It had probably only been used twice. "Where will I spend Christmas, then?" I asked quietly, trying not to let the hurt show. Michael's face crumpled. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Rosa, or we could do something the weekend after. Just not on Christmas Day." The weekend after? As though Christmas was just another appointment to be rescheduled. I stood up, my knees protesting after years of carrying this burden alone. I started walking toward the door, past the photos of our family, where my face grew smaller and smaller in each frame. My hand found the doorknob, solid and cold under my palm. "Son," I said without turning around, "tell Isabella's parents Feliz Navidad." I could hear Michael call my name, but it was too late. The door clicked shut behind me, final and absolute. I got into my truck and sat there for a moment. The engine was off, and I just watched the Christmas lights twinkle in the windows of houses where I would never be welcome again. My phone buzzed, probably Michael, wanting to smooth things over with empty promises and guilt. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the night, leaving behind the house I had bought but would never belong in. The heater hummed against the cold as I drove through familiar streets, the lights of South Hills blurring in my rearview mirror. I passed the old neighborhood, each street corner carrying memories of the man I used to be. A man who believed in family, who would have done anything to see his son smile. But that man had been a fool, and I wasn't that man anymore. I stopped at the red light on 29th and Grand. A young father was loading Christmas presents into his SUV, his kids pressed against the window, their breath fogging up the glass in excitement. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I had once been like that, full of hope and love, blind to the selfishness that lurked beneath. Now, I had become the villain in my own son's story. The numbers started rolling through my mind, like a broken slot machine. $2,800 every month for 5 years, money I had handed over without question, without hesitation. My calculator had given up trying to make sense of it last spring when I added it all up. $140,000. More money than Maria and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just like that. I pressed the accelerator harder as the light turned green. The truck growled in response, a reflection of my mood. I passed 5th Street, the place where I had refinanced my house, our house, when Michael lost his job 2 years ago. Just temporary, Dad. Just until I get back on my feet. Isabella had stood behind him, nodding sympathetically, her expensive purse hanging from her shoulder, calculating how much my desperation was worth. Nothing, as it turned out. My desperation was worth nothing. Then, there was Lincoln Street, where I had taken out a second mortgage to cover their down payment. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Flores?" the loan officer had asked me, pity in his eyes. I hadn't recognized it at the time, but now I saw it for what it was. I had put everything on the line for a future I wasn't even sure they appreciated. I pulled into my driveway, the one with cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix. Every spare dollar had gone into their perfect suburban dream. The porch light flickered, another repair I had been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow, without Maria's laughter, without the warmth of family gatherings that would never happen again. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys. I looked at the screen, Isabella's name flashing. Probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for her parents' delicate sensibilities. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years for this conversation. I answered the call, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I would pick up at all. "Dennis," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Michael." "Misunderstanding?" I echoed, leaning against the kitchen counter, still wearing my coat. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Isabella. You made your position quite clear." She sighed dramatically. "Look, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional people." I bit my lip to keep my voice steady. "A certain atmosphere, you mean?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of shopping bags rustling. Probably spending more money that should have gone toward their mortgage. "Yes, exactly. They're not used to your kind of cooking, all that spicy food and loud music. And frankly, Dennis, they're educated people. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art. You know?" The words hit me like a slap. 8 years of pretending, of swallowing insults for Michael's sake. Of biting my tongue while they treated me like I was beneath them. "My kind of cooking?" I said, voice low, controlled. "The food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when money was tight? The tamales you said reminded you of your grandmother?" She was quiet for a moment before answering. "That was different. We were appreciative then. But now with my parents. Now with your parents, you can't have the Mexican peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table." I finished for her. She let out a sharp laugh. "Don't be dramatic, Dennis. This isn't about race. It's about class." Class. The word hung in the air between us, suffocating me. "My father graduated summa cum laude from Washington State," she continued, as if the name meant something. "My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer in the Hamptons." I fought to keep my voice steady. "And what exactly would you contribute to dinner conversation? Stories about laying tile?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "You know what, Isabella? I think we're done here," I said, my voice cold. "What?" she stammered. "Dennis, wait." "No," I said firmly. "We're done. We're done pretending to be family." I hung up before she could say another word. The kitchen felt smaller, cleaner somehow, as if the air itself had lightened. I walked to my desk, pulled out the manila folder I had been avoiding for months. I spread the documents out before me, the bank statements, the mortgage papers, the automatic transfers that had bled me dry. Time to stop the bleeding. The first decision, canceling the mortgage. I made the call. The documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements, each one showing the same automatic transfer, $2,800 on the 15th of every month, vanishing from my account into theirs. A paper trail of my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The first year, $33,600. The second year, another $33,600. By the third year, I had stopped buying myself new clothes. The fourth year, I had started shopping at discount grocery stores. This year, the 5th year, I had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. A total of $143,400. Not counting the down payment I gave them. Not counting the times I had covered their utilities when Isabella's shopping addiction had spiraled out of control. Not counting the new roof, the landscaping, the furniture I had bought because it was essential for their lifestyle. I sat back in my chair, staring at the numbers until they blurred. Maria's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the college fund we had started for grandchildren I would never see. All of it gone, poured into a house where I wasn't even welcome for Christmas dinner. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number for my bank. The automated system offered me options in English and Spanish. How thoughtful. How accommodating for people like me. Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? The voice on the other end chirped. Professional. Efficient. No judgment about why a 62-year-old man was calling to cancel payments for what was likely his son's mortgage. I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Certainly, sir. I'll need your account number and some verification information. I rattled off the numbers, watching as Jennifer typed in the background. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. I wasn't the first person to make this call. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Flores, she said after a moment. Cancel it, I instructed. Very well. The automatic transfer will be cancelled effective immediately. You should receive written confirmation within 3 business days. I hung up, the weight in my chest slightly lifted. That was one part of my plan in motion. Next, I needed to deal with the car insurance. Isabella and Michael's cars were still covered under my policy. I wasn't even sure why I had done that for them in the first place. I dialed the number, feeling a sense of finality with each ring. By noon, I had made 8 calls. The mortgage payments stopped. The car insurance was cancelled. I had removed them as authorized users on my credit cards, too. The automatic transfers that had bled my accounts dry for years, all of it ended. I sat back in the cheap motel chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. There were still things to do. Big things. But this was a start. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls. No urgent messages. They didn't know yet. But they would soon. I closed my laptop, my eyes wandering to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man was loading suitcases into a pickup truck, his wife directing the operation with quiet efficiency. They probably had just visited their grandchildren or were embarking on a long-awaited vacation. I envied their easy partnership. The way they moved together, practiced and comfortable. It was a reminder that I had been a fool. I had spent too many years being the generous father, the one who provided everything for his family, without ever asking for anything in return. The phone buzzed on the table again. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. The week passed quietly. But not for them. I'd settled into a routine at Pine Lodge, coffee from the lobby, breakfast at the diner down the street, long walks around the neighborhood. I didn't care if they were trying to reach me. I wouldn't return their calls. By Wednesday, I had 12 missed calls. By Friday, 22. I listened to them in order, watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. The first few were casual, Tiffany asking about the mortgage payment. Harry leaving brief, annoyed messages about the insurance. By the middle of the week, panic had crept in. Dad, what the hell is going on? Tiffany's voice cracked with frustration. The bank says you stopped the mortgage payment. They want the full amount by Friday or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Harry's messages grew more aggressive, demanding that I fix this right away. You're making us look like deadbeats. By Friday, they were practically begging. Dad, please, we'll work something out. Just call us back. Tiffany's voice was now thick with emotion. Please. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about their growing desperation. Later that morning, I got a knock on the door. Tiffany stood on the other side, her face pale, her eyes bloodshot. Harry stood beside her, looking tense. "Dad," she began, her voice soft. "We need to talk. This isn't funny anymore." I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, watching them shift uncomfortably on the doorstep. "Come on in," I said, motioning for them to sit. "We can talk." They hesitated, then stepped inside. The silence that followed was heavy. I had been waiting for this moment. The moment they realized that everything they had taken from me, everything they thought I would just hand over, was gone. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The usual comfort of the place felt foreign now, hollowed out by betrayal. Tiffany and Harry stood in front of me, their faces a mix of frustration and guilt, a mixture they hadn't worn before. Now, it was as if the truth was sinking in for them. They weren't getting what they had always gotten, and they didn't know how to handle it. "I don't know what to say, Dad," Tiffany began, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You've always been so generous. Why now? Why are you doing this?" I looked at her, my daughter, the woman I had given everything to. The woman who had once climbed into my lap as a child, who had asked me to read her stories, who had once believed in me as much as I believed in her. Now, she was standing there, asking why I was taking a stand for myself. "Why now?" I echoed, almost laughing. "Tiffany, I've been doing this for years. For you. For Harry. For your kids. And what do I get in return?" I motioned toward the living room, the one where I had spent years sitting in that old leather chair, watching my family go on, needing and taking, without a second thought. "You've treated me like a bank, like an ATM. Just another source of money to fund your little fantasies, and I've let you. I've let you because I thought you were my family. But now I'm done." Tiffany's eyes welled up, but she didn't wipe away the tears. She just looked at me, searching for the man who had always given, always sacrificed. But that man was gone. "Dad, please," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I've been trying to get it together, I really have. But you know how hard things have been. I just thought you would help. That's what family does." I took a deep breath, not allowing myself to get lost in the rush of emotions that threatened to rise. This wasn't about being angry anymore. This was about standing firm, about reclaiming the life I had left. "Family does help, Tiffany. But family doesn't bleed you dry and expect nothing in return. And family doesn't use guilt as a weapon." Harry shifted uncomfortably behind her, clearly aware that he had no place in this discussion. He had been the catalyst for much of the mess. The man who never worked hard enough to understand the value of $1, the one who spent my money like it was his own. "I'm sorry, okay?" Tiffany's voice cracked. "We've been selfish. But don't do this. We can work it out, we can fix this." She reached out to me, like she was hoping to pull me back into the fold. "Fix it?" I repeated, my voice cold. "No, Tiffany. This time, I'm fixing it. This time, I'm stopping the bleeding." I stood up and moved toward the small desk in the corner of the room. From the drawer, I pulled out the folder I had been keeping for months, the documents I had been avoiding for far too long. The same ones that would change everything. "Here's the thing, Tiffany," I said, turning to face her with the folder in my hand. "This is where the help stops. Your mother and I spent our whole lives working for what we had. Sacrificing everything, even our own happiness, so you could have everything you ever wanted. But I see now, it was never enough for you. And I'm done. You don't get to use me anymore." I walked past them, my footsteps deliberate and firm. "I've canceled the mortgage payments. The car insurance? Gone. The credit cards? Blocked. And the bank transfers? They stopped today. You'll find out soon enough, but I'm not the one you're going to blame. I've given you everything I can give. But now, you'll have to figure things out without me. I won't be your safety net anymore." I saw the shock on their faces as I turned and walked toward the door. "I love you, Tiffany. I always have. But I'm not going to be your fool anymore. You'll figure it out. You always do. With that, I walked out of the house, leaving them behind. The house that I had worked so hard to build, now a symbol of all the years I had sacrificed for nothing. As I reached the car, I could hear Tiffany's voice calling my name, desperate, pleading. But it was too late. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. The engine started with a growl, and I pulled out of the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt lighter than I had in years, but the road ahead still felt uncertain. The engine hummed steadily as I drove away, the familiar streets of the neighborhood fading into the distance. The quiet of the car wrapped around me, the kind of silence that comes after a storm. But there was no peace in this silence, only the weight of what I had just done. I had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. But it had to be done. I didn't look back. As I drove, memories of Maria crept into my mind, memories of the life we had built together, the life we had dreamed of for our family. Every corner of the house I had left behind was filled with echoes of her laughter, her gentle way of making a house feel like a home. We had created something beautiful, but it had been slowly consumed by greed and selfishness. By people I thought would always be there, but who had taken everything I had to give without ever truly giving back. I pulled into my driveway, the old house that Maria and I had called home for over 30 years. The porch light flickered as usual, the cracked concrete driveway a reminder of all the repairs I had put off, all the things I had neglected for their sake. But now, it was just me. No more distractions, no more responsibilities. Just me and the empty house. I sat in the truck for a while, the sound of my own breathing the only thing I could hear. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the stillness. It was Tiffany. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the screen, watching her name flash in the dark. She was trying to fix it. Trying to make everything go back to the way it was. But she couldn't. No one could. I had already made the calls. The bank, the insurance company, the credit card companies. Everything was in motion. There was no turning back now. The people I had once trusted, the people I had sacrificed for, they would face the consequences of their actions. They would feel the weight of what they had done. The doorbell rang a few minutes later, followed by a soft knock. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Tiffany. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. When I opened it, she was standing there, her face a mixture of anger and desperation. She had brought Harry with her, of course. The ever-present shadow that had stood behind her through all of this. "Dad," she started, her voice sharp. "What the hell did you do? Do you have any idea what you've caused? You think this is going to make everything better? You think you can just cut us off like this and walk away?" I stood there, my hand on the doorframe, letting her words wash over me. She was angry, yes. But it wasn't real anger. It was the kind of anger that comes from fear, the fear of losing control. "You want to know what I've caused?" I asked, my voice steady, cold. "I've caused you to face the reality of what you've been doing to me for the last 5 years. You and Harry have taken everything. And for what? So you could live in a house you don't even appreciate? So you could buy things you don't need on my dime?" Tiffany's mouth opened as if she was going to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No," I said. "I'm done. I'm done being your bank, done being your ATM, done with all of it. It's time you learned what it feels like to stand on your own. I've done enough." Harry stepped forward then, trying to assert himself, but I wasn't going to back down. "Clark, this is crazy. You've lost your mind. You're just angry because we called you out, because you're not getting your way. We're family. You don't just shut us out like this. You don't." "I didn't shut anyone out." I cut him off. "You did. You and Tiffany. By treating me like a resource, like I was just here to give you what you wanted, when you wanted it. By turning your back on me every time I needed you. This is all on you." The silence hung between us, thick and heavy, and for a moment, I thought Tiffany was going to say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she just turned and walked away, Harry following closely behind. As they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end. The end of everything I had once known. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my eyes closed for a moment. The weight of the last few days, the weight of the decisions I had made, settled into my bones. But there was no regret, not yet. Maybe there wouldn't ever be. The following days passed quietly. The phone calls stopped. The texts stopped. And as much as I expected them to come flooding back, they didn't. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. And then, the bills started coming. The first one arrived on Wednesday. A late payment notice from the bank, followed by another warning from the insurance company. It didn't take long for them to figure it out. They called. They begged. They pleaded. I didn't answer. The phone calls continued, each one more desperate than the last. Each time, I let them ring. I wasn't interested in their apologies, their pleas for forgiveness. They had pushed me to this point, and now they had to deal with the consequences of their own actions. I sat in my old armchair that evening, the one Maria and I had picked out together, the one that had been a part of every important conversation we'd ever had. The TV played softly in the background, but I wasn't really watching. I was staring at the empty space in front of me, the space where my family had once gathered. I thought about Michael, about how he had grown distant over the years. How I had given and given, only to be pushed aside when Isabella's family came into the picture. How quickly he had chosen her over me. I thought about Tiffany and Harry. The way they had used me, their calls never about what they could do for me, only what I could do for them. The way they had come to expect my support, my money, my unconditional help. But when it was time for me to ask for something in return, when it was time for me to simply be treated with respect, they abandoned me. I wasn't angry anymore, though. The anger had faded. What was left was just a quiet, undeniable truth. I had been taken for granted. And now, I had taken my power back. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. This time, it wasn't from Tiffany. It was from the bank. A final notice for the mortgage, with a threatening message about foreclosure. I had known it would happen eventually. I thought about calling back, but the moment passed. The reality was simple. I was done. They would learn to deal with their own mess. They would have to pick up the pieces of their lives without me holding them together. And then it came. The letter. I found it on my doorstep one evening, after I had returned from another quiet day at Pine Lodge. It was from a law firm, a letter of intent to sue. I opened it slowly, already knowing what it would say. They were coming after me. After everything I had done for them, everything I had sacrificed, they were now trying to turn the tables. They wanted me to reverse the cancellations. They wanted me to pay back the money I had taken from them. I smiled bitterly as I read through the legalese. This was it. The final attempt to bring me back into their web. The last effort to make me feel guilty for taking control of my life. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. When the receptionist answered, I asked to speak with the lawyer handling the case. A few moments later, a smooth, professional voice came through the line. Mr. Flores, I understand you've received our letter. My client, Tiffany Jenkins, has instructed us to pursue legal action in regard to the cancelled payments. We believe this is a matter of... Let me stop you right there. I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. I've already made my decision. I'm not reversing anything. You can tell Tiffany that if she wants to take this to court, she's welcome to. But I won't be dragged into it. I won't be bullied or manipulated any longer. The lawyer was quiet for a moment. Sir, I'm not sure you understand the severity of this situation. We have every intention of... I understand perfectly, I said, cutting him off again. You tell her I'll see her in court if it comes to that. But she needs to understand something. This isn't about the money. This is about respect. Something she lost a long time ago. I hung up before he could say another word. For a moment, I stood there in the silence, the weight of my own words hanging in the air. But there was no regret. I had made my choice. And no matter what came next, I knew I was doing the right thing. The next week, I received a call from the bank. The mortgage was in default, and foreclosure proceedings were imminent. They wanted to discuss options, wanted to know if I was planning to pay the arrears. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the call go to voicemail, then deleted it without listening to the message. Later that day, I saw Michael's name flash on my phone. I didn't pick up. I wasn't sure what he wanted this time, but I didn't have the energy to listen to more empty apologies. More promises he would never keep. As I sat in the silence of my house, I realized something. I was free. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free from the lies, the guilt, and the manipulation. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And in that moment, I understood that what they didn't realize, what they never would, was that the true cost of their actions wasn't the money. It was the loss of family. The loss of trust. The loss of something I could never get back. But I was done chasing it. I was done being the one who gave and gave, only to have it thrown back in my face. It had been 2 weeks since the last call, and the silence that followed felt like a heavy blanket, one that suffocated any lingering thoughts of guilt. But with the silence came clarity. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. The phone call stopped, and I didn't hear from Tiffany or Michael, or anyone else. I'd thought the first week would have brought relief, but instead, it made the absence of noise more noticeable. The house seemed emptier than it had been when Maria was still here. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. And then it came, the final blow. It was an afternoon like any other when the knock came at the door. I opened it to find 2 men in suits standing on the porch, holding a set of papers. They didn't look like typical delivery men. These men were here for business. "Mr. Flores?" one of them asked, his voice smooth and professional. "We're here regarding the foreclosure proceedings on your property." I looked at the papers they held and felt a familiar coldness settle in my chest. This was it. This was what I had been waiting for, the consequence of everything I had done. I had expected it, but seeing it in front of me still made my heart race. "Is there anything you would like to discuss before we proceed?" the second man asked. I didn't answer at first. Instead, I glanced at the house behind me, at all the memories that filled it. Maria's favorite chair in the living room, the worn kitchen table where we used to sit together, the hallway that had once echoed with the sound of our children's laughter. I had given so much, sacrificed so much for this house, for this family, and now it was slipping through my fingers. But there was no turning back. "No," I said quietly, stepping aside to let them in. "It's too late for that." The men moved past me, their footsteps echoing in the empty house. The first man laid out the papers on the dining room table, while the second one checked the house for any last details. They went through the motions, but I was no longer invested in their actions. This was what I had chosen. They explained the process, what would happen next, but I barely listened. I had already made my peace with it. The house, the life I had worked so hard to build, was no longer mine. It was their loss, not mine. I had nothing left to give. After they left, I sat in the empty living room, staring at the papers they had left behind. It was official now. The house would be gone soon, but in a way, I had already let it go. The next few days felt like a blur. The calls from the bank started to come again, offers to help, reminders of payments that had been missed, threats of more action. But I didn't care. I ignored each one. The bank had taken enough from me. They had been complicit in this entire scheme. I wasn't going to beg them to take me back. I thought about the years I had spent building everything, only to watch it all crumble because of the greed and selfishness of those I had trusted. But I didn't regret what I had done. They had pushed me too far, and in the end, I had reclaimed my dignity. And then, one evening, the phone rang again. I wasn't sure why I answered it this time, but I did. "Dad?" It was Michael's voice. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the familiar sound of his voice, the voice I had longed to hear for so long. But there was something different in it now, something softer, more uncertain. "I've been trying to get a hold of you," he continued, sounding like he didn't know what to say next. I know you're angry with me, and I get it. I wanted to apologize. I didn't realize how much you had done for us. How much you sacrificed. I didn't say anything. Instead, I just listened. I didn't need to rush into this. I had waited years for this moment, but now that it had come, I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of everything that had happened. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, Michael said, his voice breaking a little. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Please, just tell me you're all right. I stayed silent for a long moment. I wasn't sure what to say. In some ways, I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how much I had given and how little I had received in return. But at the same time, part of me wanted to forgive him. I'm fine, Michael, I said finally, my voice steady. I'm more than fine. But you need to understand something. I'm done. I've done everything I could for you. For all of you. And now it's your turn. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, but this time, it didn't feel like the weight of regret. It felt like closure. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it right, Michael said quietly. You won't, I replied. But you'll have to figure it out on your own. Just like I had to. And with that, I hung up the phone. The phone calls had stopped for a while, and the silence in the house felt like a strange kind of peace. I had spent my life making things right for others, but now it was my turn. The foreclosure was going through, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't angry either. I had made my decision, and now it was time to live with it. I packed up the few things I truly cared about. Maria's old photo albums, some family heirlooms, and a few keepsakes from my own past. It felt strange to go through the motions, as if I was saying goodbye to a life that had already moved on without me. I had come to realize that the house wasn't home anymore. The house had been just a place where memories were made, yes, but also a place where dreams were shattered. It wasn't the walls or the furniture that made it home. It was the people, and they were long gone. I had spent too many years believing that if I just gave more, if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, everything would be okay. But nothing ever changed. The only thing that changed was me. I had become someone I barely recognized, someone who had lost himself in the process of trying to hold everything together. Now, I was finally starting to see the person I used to be, the person who didn't have to prove his worth to anyone, the person who had dreams and ambitions of his own, before they had all been buried under the weight of everyone else's expectations. The last few boxes were packed into the back of my truck, and I stood there for a moment, looking at the house one last time. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, but I knew it didn't matter. I was free now. Free from the weight of guilt, free from the pressure to give, free from the constant manipulation. I drove down the familiar streets, the ones that had once been so full of meaning. The neighborhood looked different now, like a place I no longer recognized. But it was okay. Change was inevitable, and I had to accept it. I had spent too much time resisting it. The road ahead stretched out in front of me, a blank canvas. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of it. I stopped at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place I used to visit with Maria when we had a quiet afternoon to ourselves. I ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the world go by. The weight of everything that had happened settled onto my shoulders, but it wasn't heavy anymore. I felt lighter somehow, as if I had left behind the burden of everyone else's expectations. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't pick it up. I was done with the calls, the apologies, and the demands. I was finally living for myself. A few hours passed, and I decided to leave the cafe and head toward the open road. There was no destination in mind, just the promise of a new chapter. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the fields as I drove. I wasn't sure where I was going, but for the first time in years, it didn't matter. As I looked ahead, I realized that the journey ahead would be mine to define. No more worrying about how others saw me or what they needed from me. No more living in the shadows of their expectations. This was my time. And whatever came next, I would face it on my terms. The road stretched on, and I followed it, 1 mile at a time, It had been weeks since I drove away from the house, from everything I once knew. The road I was on now was one I had never traveled before. It was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of that uncertainty. I had spent too much of my life trying to control things that were never meant to be controlled. But now, I had learned that peace didn't come from making everything perfect. It came from letting go. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I wasn't going to find it by staying where I was. There were still people in my life who might never understand the choices I had made, and that was fine. What mattered now was that I understood them. I had learned a hard truth. It wasn't love that was supposed to be unconditional. It was respect. And once I stopped demanding others' approval, once I stopped trying to earn a place in their lives, I had found the strength to walk away. To stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. I parked my truck by a quiet lake, a place I used to visit with Maria. She loved the sound of the water, the way the world seemed to slow down when we sat on the shore, just watching the ripples. It felt like the right place to stop. To breathe. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the water. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, the stillness calming my mind. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I sat by the water's edge, letting the thoughts that had been swirling in my head fade into the background. There was no rushing here. No phone calls, no demands, no apologies. Just me and the quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. I had been through hell, but I had come out on the other side stronger. The journey wasn't over, but it was finally mine to navigate. There was no map, no blueprint. Just the open road ahead, and the knowledge that I had taken back my life. I looked out across the lake, the water reflecting the colors of the sky, and I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for all these years. Freedom. I didn't need anyone's permission to be who I was. I didn't need anyone to validate my choices or my worth. I had earned this. I had fought for it. And I was going to keep fighting, one step at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood up, dusted the dirt from my pants, and turned toward the truck. The road ahead was mine. And I was ready. The last chapter of my life was still unwritten, but I had found the strength to take the pen back into my own hands. And with that, I drove off into the night, knowing that the best was yet to come.